Dave here, and we've got a new episode in the art review series. And today we're going to check out the work of Alexander Mandradjiev. I'm not sure if I discovered him via Marvel, because he has a lot of work concerning Marvel movies, and I'm not sure if I discovered him before that. I do feel like I stumbled upon his work way before or way back. But yeah, he's a very interesting fella. He calls himself a cinematic illustrator, and it is a weird kind of name, or kind of title. I think he does focus more on keyframes, and I believe he has a background on storyboarding. Because if you take a look at his portfolio, he's not heavy on the kind of design aspect of art. He's very heavy on the kind of the mood, the visual kind of storytelling, and I think that's where he really focuses more on. And I think Alexander has kind of opened up this this world of visual storytelling, I feel, because he does his work. He's very kind of unique in this style. Often his work is very kind of flat, or very kind of editorial looking. Flat in the sense that it's very heavy on the shapes and not exactly super, it's not typical concept art, you know? And I think that's what makes his work very interesting. And if you cycle through his work, it's actually very interesting. Yeah, he's very heavy on the silhouettes, the shapes, and I don't think he does design much. I mean, he can design. I've seen him done some helmets for the villain in Spider-Man Homecoming, I think. And yeah, but if you take a look at the way he does his figures, human figures, he just knows where to place them, and I think it's because of his background in storyboarding. I believe he did some storyboards before going more into kind of colored painted keyframes. And so these are some shots or frames for Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh no, it's the Avengers Infinity thing, right? And his work is generally very dark. Not a lot of light in his work, and I don't know, maybe it's because of his personality or something. By the way, he does have a YouTube channel, and he does it with his girlfriend or wife, I think, with his babe, and I will link the link in the description below. And yeah, I'm actually kind of enjoying a lot of his videos recently, because he does play a kind of a real-time demo in the background as he talks. He doesn't talk while he paints, because I think he did mention that he doesn't do well when he kind of paints and talk at the same time. So I think he found a way to be able to talk through his videos, and that's by having something recorded, play in the background, and him kind of just doing essentially kind of a commentary and voiceover. And he's actually more of a painter. He's not very heavy on the 3D. I don't think he actually does use any 3D at all. And I think his work does look very unique. I saw in one of his art pieces here on ArtStation, and someone commented on it, and the guy said that Alexander does have a very unique style, in that, because in concept art, a lot of the art you see, say, on ArtStation does look very similar, and you're kind of losing the personality of the artist. It's almost as if you have to subscribe to a specific kind of style, like to a kind of established style. But Alexander is kind of different. His work is very, again, it does set him apart. And the fact that he does more storytelling than design, I think is it's kind of a nice way to ease certain artists like me, because I'm starting to realize that maybe I'm not a great designer. I mean, I can get good at anything, because if you just keep focusing on something and keep working on something, and if you're tenacious, You'll eventually get good at it, but I think I'm kind of diving deep in terms of your own kind of personality, or character, or inclination. I think just by being reflective, you should be able to find out if or where you kind of fit, because he did mention. Before I get into that, I should just say that this is an awesome kind of keyframe, and once I saw this, I was like very hooked into the idea of doing more keyframes, or it kind of opened up that possibility that maybe I shouldn't be the designer kind of guy. For example, in this piece, Black Panther over here is really just in a silhouette. You can hardly see any details, but there's so much storytelling here. It's kind of like, it's a very epic, subtle scene. It's almost as if he was just over some kind of or a fight scene, just kind of a fight scene just kind of ended, and is kind of just overlooking the entire scene. I don't know. There's just something about pieces like this that makes you kind of just look at it, and makes you kind of think and feel, question. It makes you linger a bit more with the frame, right? Some more Black Panther stuff here. And yeah, I think he did open up this kind of possibility of maybe there are artists out there that are more story centered than design centered, and maybe I am one of those guys, or maybe you are one of those folks. Because again, if you go to like ArtStation and you just check the community kind of tab, whenever you open up ArtStation, a lot of it is actually more design. Like a character is kind of just in a simple background, and the artist is essentially showing the fashion, maybe the armor design or whatever. And same thing for environments. It's just like a static kind of environment, and there's not a lot of keyframe kind of storytelling kind of art going on ArtStation. A lot of it is actually more, it's very design heavy. And I think Alexander is one of those artists that has kind of opened up. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself here. I think he's making the idea of storytelling look cool again. Because storytelling is not like a new thing, it's been there forever. But he does it in such a way that it makes you want to tell your own story. And I do recommend you watch his YouTube channel, and he does a lot of he gives a lot of advice, and he gives a lot of his insights whenever he paints stuff. And yeah, it's just very helpful. And he does have a very kind of raspy kind of voice. It's not very like deep. It's very kind of raspy, and it's kind of like easy on the ears. So I do recommend you check out this channel. So this is I think a Black Panther scene with the rhino, obviously. And again, he doesn't overly detail everything, and that's what's cool about his work. Very heavy on the shapes, very heavy on the silhouettes, and he does focus more on cinematic kind of frames. This is kind of over 2.39:1. It's kind of beyond that a bit. If it's kind of horizontally elongated, I think it's cinematic enough. Because the more you kind of box it, or the more it looks squarish, it tends to not look as cinematic. So you want to be kind of horizontally elongated, right? When it comes to your frames. And I think this is kind of a fight scene, or a priming up of a kind of fight scene in the Black Panther film. And again, look at how he does his figures. Most of it is just silhouette, right? And he does detail this guy a bit more. Detail in the sense that there's a bit more values shown, so you can kind of see a bit more form, or he can suggest more form, because obviously it's way closer. But yeah, it's very cool. And I actually find it interesting because he does a lot of line sketches actually, in like small post-it notes, and he can essentially just color over it. And it's actually, he does have a very simple process. I recommend you check out his YouTube channel. He doesn't have a very complicated process. He does like to keep his layers to a minimum. So he essentially paints on one layer for the most part, or for most of his painting process, right? And a lot of his line sketches actually remain, or they're kind of good enough to paint over with, and it still kind of gets the job done. So this is a kind of Black Panther kind of thing. And I think he does avoid photo bashing. He likes to paint more, but I think it makes sense to photo bash. For example, in this kind of background, he did use a photo texture for the leaves because it just makes sense to save time, especially if you're working on a timeline, right? And again, this character, this Black Panther guy, he's essentially in a silhouette, and everything else is it's more about lighting. And I think Mandradjiev focuses a lot on the lighting, and it does this kind of effect where it's kind of like a highlight, a very sharp kind of highlight, and it just looks really, really cool. And again, it's not super heavy with the rendering, which makes his work very kind of solid and less kind of very bold and dynamic. The perspective shots, I think, is what makes his work dynamic. But his kind of painting style, the very bold strokes, he's not a renderer kind of guy where he goes in on a certain part and renders something to a kind of fine-tuned level. He's very kind of just direct, and again, heavy on the shapes, heavy on the silhouettes, and a lot of his Marvel stuff actually does have a lot of lighting effects. He plays a lot with the hues. I'm not sure if he does it after, or he establishes kind of the palette beforehand. He does show in a lot of his videos that he does have like photos on the side, not just for references, but the photos themselves serve as some kind of color palette. Like he's not married to the photo or to the photos. He just uses them mostly for the palette, and the colors, the hues. And if you notice in a lot of his work, it does have a cinematic kind of look, not just in terms of the frame, right? But the actual kind of colors in it. It does have kind of like a color grade, and it looks almost like a snapshot from a movie. And yeah. And of course, the kind of dynamic poses in his work, the perspective kind of shots. It's not always just a stable kind of view. And again, if you check out his figure right here, it's not heavy on the rendering. It's essentially a silhouette, right? And with some values in it to kind of indicate or suggest some form. Even for this kind of villain here, again, it's just a silhouette, but he just gets it right. And if you kind of get the main silhouette right, everything else kind of just is kind of just a supplementary thing. And yeah. Some more Spider-Man Homecoming shots. Look at how he simplified the hand, he simplified the back here, and the attire, the fashion. It's not even super detailed. He does indicate some of the folds. But yeah, look at that. I think most of this is just painted. And yeah, I'm actually kind of excited to have more of this in my work, because I did a recent piece of a character concept, and it kind of took too long for me. I did kind of enjoy the process, but it kind of felt too tight, and it doesn't feel kind of natural to me. And just by seeing Alexander Mandradjiev's work, I'm kind of inspired to try his approach, not just to lean more into storytelling, but not just to be kind of cinematic about it, like with the colors, and trying to apply some of his painting techniques in terms of being heavy on the shapes. being or having strong silhouettes, but just in general focusing more on storytelling, on like shots. So essentially kind of colored storyboards or storyboard frames, right? And I think that's where I should try and explore more. And he did mention in one of his videos about how he got to where he is today. I'm not sure what video it was, but it was just very kind of nice to hear that he didn't figure everything out kind of in a snap. He had to take his own journey, and yeah, it is kind of unsettling, you know, if you're trying to find your own, like, where you fit in this kind of art world. And it does take a lot of trial and error, lots of experimentation, and I think you just have to keep trying every day so you can just get more feedback. And because you need to be able to make a good adjustment, you need to have some kind of information to make an adjustment, and you can't have information if you haven't done anything, right? So you have to be willing to make mistakes and make a bad move, so you can actually make the right adjustment. And again, if you focus on the recent frames I showed you here, very, I don't know, heavy on the color dodge, perhaps. The lighting effect is very interesting. Now this one is actually a flipped. Like, Spider-Man is actually in the bottom of the plane, which is really cool. You can tell by the city and by the the engines here. Very awesome. And again, it does have a very kind of neon kind of lighting effect here, which happens in a lot of his Marvel work. More keyframes, obviously, because he does focus more on keyframes. Shit. And I like the way he did the rain though, and he did add some kind of kind of water effects that are kind of blurred. And you can look at that, very heavy on the shape design here. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Excusez-moi. So not just the shapes themselves. Fuck. Everything is kind of interesting. The shot, the pose, the lighting. This is pretty cool. It's actually kind of dark and subtle, but it does show you the Spider-Man kind of character. The expression of the eyes, I think, is a nice kind of touch. It really kind of, it does give you the essence of Spider-Man. So this is kind of the villain with this kind of nice wings. I think we're coming close to his helmet designs here, and I think it did photo bash the jacket here. Oh yeah, these are some of his helmet designs. So he can actually design, and even his designs are kind of set in a very cinematic kind of color palette, right? Look at the way he handled the glare here, or the reflection, right? And he kind of knows how to play with multiple light sources. Some coming from like natural light sources, some from kind of like artificial ones like fluorescent lights, and some kind of within the actual kind of character. And he just knows how to play with everything at the same time. This one is actually pretty cool. You have some blues, you have some reds, you have some yellows, and you have some greens. Very cool stuff. Oh, this one is actually kind of epic. And he actually does look like an actual villain. And I think the lighting does help, and the colors also, like the way the hues are kind of not as saturated in some areas, and they're kind of just bright in these parts. I think it's very deliberate in the way he does his lighting. For example, with this kind of Doctor Strange thing, he does go heavy on the darks. And what's so cool about his darks is that it does have a lot of variety in it, not just in terms of the shapes, but the actual hues. There are actual hues in his darks, and I think it's a very common theme in his work to be very kind of sparing with the highlights and any kind of light source. And yeah, he does go heavier on the darks. Some more Doctor Strange stuff. I mean, look at this thing. I think I was trying to explore the kind of other realm in the film. And again, it does have a very epic kind of look. Now this one's a bit more squished in that it's not a very cinematic kind of frame, but this one's actually a bit brighter compared to the previous one. But look at that. And again, not super heavy on the details, very impressionistic, but even though it's kind of very playful with the way he paints, he does maintain it or constrain that kind of flamboyantness with this painting style with very strong edges, very strong shapes, very strong silhouettes. And I think it's a kind of a nice complementary thing, very painterly kind of strokes, but they're kind of contained in almost like a graphic kind of shape, right? These ones are not Marvel. They're kind of his recent work is kind of heavy on the Marvel stuff, but I think he did use a photo for the jeans. I mean, it could have been painted, but I doubt it. Or maybe he did paint the jeans. It's actually kind of hard to tell because it's actually kind of good. Again, with this piece, he left all the characters in silhouette. He did focus more on this area. And look at the way he simplified this kind of anatomy here, showing off a bit of the pec, right? And again, it's not super detailed, but it does have some story in it. And so we've got a dragon piece here with some knights. It's a very active scene. I think it does have another version of this. Not as bright, not as heavy on the fires and all, but the same kind of idea. Now these ones are actually more painted. He did this for some kind of Amazon film, but if you notice, it's actually kind of painted. It's a bit more rendered, not rendered, but more painted. He doesn't have a kind of fine rendering style, like most art in, say, ArtStation, right? He's more of a painter, which I am a big fan of. Look at that. Maybe he did use a photo here, right? I think it's some kind of egg. It's very eerie, and I think it did capture that kind of eerie feeling, right? So this piece actually reminds me of Victor Hugo Harmatio, I think is Brazilian, a Brazilian concept artist, and I don't know, it does have kind of the same effect with the highlights and all. Very cool lighting design or approach. He does have a video of this kind of demo, and in this case he did use a simple round brush, and he did start off with a simple sketch done with a ballpoint, and then he just kind of painted over it. And look at how it did maintain, right? Like a lot of the main shapes are still there in the actual painted piece, and he did have like photo references to kind of get some of the colors right, and yeah. And a lot of his shots are, again, very cinematic. I believe he did use the smudge tool here. And he also likes adding some noise to his work a bit. Now this one is actually a bit more flat. Not a lot of texture in the brushes used here. Heavy on the smudge tool. Very hard edged. And again, very nice. He didn't go overboard with the definition of the shapes. He just kind of got the main kind of values right, and everything else kind of just suggests itself. So this one's kind of a mermaid thing, underwater kind of concept. And this one's actually, I think this is the comment where, oh, was it this one? Because a lot of his work actually does look a bit flat, right? Like almost like an editorial kind of illustration. But it does work for film, because you have to kind of be very smart with how you allocate your shapes or figures in a kind of frame, right? And I think having a kind of a flat mindset, flat illustration kind of mindset, I think does help. It's not so much a flat type of mindset, but a graphic storyboarding kind of mindset, right? Because you want to make use of the actual frame, so you have to be smart with how you distribute your characters, environments, and yeah. I think it did use a lot of the smudge tool here, and again, not very defined, heavy on the shapes, and the values just kind of for as long as you kind of have the right value and it's kind of clear enough that you can kind of tell which part is kind of distinguished from another. You can kind of, it kind of works. For example, for this piece, it's not very sharp or clean with the edges, but the values are right enough that you can tell which one is the character, which one is the hand, which one is the kind of sleeve, which one is the kind of highlight of the face, right? So yeah, heavy on the values. Again, essentially silhouettes, but he did add some. This one actually feels more like a Star Wars kind of thing. Sci-fi concept. Great mood painting. He's not very. This one feels more like a sketch. He's not very defined with the edges of the silhouette even, but the lighting is kind of there. It does signify some kind of mood. Oh, I think he started off this piece with an actual sketch. A marker sketch. Probably in some kind of post-it note. And look at how much of it was retained in the main image. You can kind of get it right in the beginning. And I think that's the point he's trying to make whenever he's kind of showing the sketches. His thumbnail kind of sketches is that I think it emphasizes how important thumbnails are. And if you kind of get it right in the beginning, or get it right enough, the moment you kind of paint over it, it just makes sense and it just kind of looks good eventually. Look at the way he handled the lighting here. And again, not super defined, it's very painterly. So I like how he applies this kind of painterly style in a kind of graphic manner, right? In a kind of storyboard kind of manner. Nice shot. Now this one's actually not a cinematic kind of shot. It's almost like a portrait kind of a thing. But it does have some storytelling. And I think he also does a lot of film studies, I believe. Where he kind of studies like snapshots, frames of a film. And look at the mood in this piece. It's almost very mellow, very kind of sad, very quiet, I feel. And you can see it in the lighting in the city, the hue of the entire frame, it's kind of bluish. And the character is kind of set in the dark side, the silhouette, right? The room, in this kind of room. The room here, where the character is set, is actually not lit. So it does add a bit more. Like there are so many things he does that adds to the kind of story, and it's really cool. Ooh, nice back. Heavy on the greens here. And a lot of his older non-Marvel stuff does involve a lot of the spacing of the brush strokes, which I do like seeing because it's kind of like a nice byproduct that comes with using Photoshop. Being able to see the spacing of the brush and kind of consequently adds its own texture, and it does have an appeal. I used to hate it, but it's kind of an acquired taste for me. And look at the way he'd handled the folds here, right? And very heavy on the silhouette. This entire part here is essentially dark, and he handled the lights pretty well. So this could be some kind of ship in the background. And again, it's not super defined, but this guy is obviously trying to fix something, clean something up, maybe fix some of the wiring. Very nice. Very impressionistic. Especially with the background, but he does go into detail. Maybe that's not the right way of saying it. He does clear the edges in the areas of focus. So he doesn't have to like go in so deep to kind of render things. His way of focusing in on something is actually clarifying the edge a bit more, or clarifying shapes within a certain silhouette. And that's pretty much it. Not a lot of like rendering style, a rendering kind of approach. Very heavy on the edges whenever he tries to focus in on something. I love the brush spacing here. Very impressionistic. Look at that. There's this kind of window here, right? The reflection of this kind of babe with the dress. And wow, look at that. And a lot of hues involved. It's heavily on the warm side, right? Warmer side. But actually, in this part right here and in this light source, you can actually see some cooler tones or hues, right? Very, very interesting. This actually feels very vintage-ish to me. And I think I'm not sure about this, but I think he's heavily influenced, or I can see a lot of his work being influenced by editorial kinds of illustrations, right? And I like this kind of nice complementary thing. Very heavy on the warm side, but the more you go into this kind of lower part of the upper part of the chest and the kind of dress here, you can actually see some cooler tones or hues, right? Look at how he simplified the face to just shapes, right? Very heavy on the planes of the forms. Instead of like going into like the rendering aspect of it, he just goes in for the main shapes or the main planes, and that's pretty much it. It reminds me of Adam Hughes a bit, because if you've seen Adam Hughes' work, he is kind of a comic illustrator, comic cover artist. But whenever you see his pencil sketches, very heavy on the shapes. He's not very heavy on the form building. He just goes in on his figures as if it's kind of like a graphical kind of piece. And I think Alexander Mandradjiev has the same kind of mindset. Heavy on the shapes. Very awesome. And again, not super detailed, man. But it's enough. Right? Nice keyframe here. This one is, I think he did a few sketches beforehand of this piece. I think this one is entitled Strength, because obviously two of these guys are battling each other. Iron Man does have his kind of a shit. I forgot what the suit is called. It's kind of like the Hulk kind of it's a suit designed specifically to handle the Hulk. So let's go back to these sketches and oh, I'm not sure who this character is. I do know Captain America is obviously this guy, right? This guy. But the guy with the whip? Not sure who that is. But again, look at the sketches. Very heavy on the shapes, dynamic poses, almost comic-like, right? Like the poses and shit. Very dynamic. It's not boring at all. Like it's an actual kind of snapshot of a scene, right? And he kind of knows how to get the right kind of shot. Fuck. Let's go back to the Iron Man and Hulk thing. Look at that. So maybe he did use a few. You know what? I'm not sure if he used photos here. Maybe he just painted the sparks and things. But again, look at the way he paints Iron Man and the Hulk. Well, for Hulk, you can actually just see his arm, but it's not overly rendered. Alright? And again, he does know how to play with the hues. I do know that he does have like photo references on the side to kind of get the color palette, but maybe he does, like after painting, maybe he does go in on some adjustment layers and kind of adjust the colors to kind of get this very interesting kind of look. I'm not sure how to classify this kind of color palette. It's very common in this Marvel stuff, I think. Heavy on the neon lights. Maybe lots of color dodge, I don't know. But it's very, very saturated. Now this one is actually lit up. A lot of his Marvel stuff is actually set in a dark scene. And this one is actually kind of the opposite of that. But it still has... Excuse me. Fuck. It still has a kind of neon color dodged kind of thing, right? a sci-fi piece, perhaps an older piece of his. Excuse me. And again, very painterly, very impressionistic, heavy on the storytelling, right? He's not a designer kind of guy. Oh, this one's a pretty long cinematic shot, right? And I think this one's the detailed version of it. He did kind of shorten the length of the image. And again, a lot of this isn't even detailed, right? This could be some kind of underground environment. I think this is kind of a vampire series he was doing, but this scene actually kind of evokes the kind of occult in the world we have, you know? Because there are groups out there that like to hang out and wear their, you know, masks and shit and practice their rituals. And it kind of this scene reminds me of that kind of scary kind of almost satanic kind of like cult, right? That's a pretty long neck. And again with the masks, it reminds me of a film. I think Tom Cruise played in it. And apparently it's kind of based on reality, that film. There's essentially this kind of because I know there's not just one group, right? There are many groups out there that you know, the elitists. Anyway, more vampire stuff. I love the scene. Look at the way he simplified the background. Heavy on the strokes, very impressionistic. And he did go define a few more shapes in the mask of this vampire guy. This reminds me of Star Wars because this form is very General Grievous-ish or esque, right? Just with the way the arms are kind of set and the eyes. You can't really see the mouth here, but I think it is a General Grievous character. And even the legs, right? Again, very dynamic scene. I love the lighting effects. Lens flare, lots of lens flare in his work. So yeah, I think he did use some photos obviously to save time, but for the characters themselves, heavy again on the silhouettes, right? Oh, nice fire scene here. And he did go with some cools here. Are purples cool or on the warm side? Not sure. Again, I think this is some kind of sci-fi scene. And this is perhaps some of his storyboard stuff. Usually storyboards are done kind of black and white or grayscale, but I've seen a few artists go in with some color. Obviously they take a bit more time when you do color, and it kind of takes away the effectiveness of storyboards sometimes, because I feel like you need to be fast when doing storyboards, and when you're doing colors, maybe if you do have like more time, maybe you can add some colors and shit. But yeah, very dynamic shots here. Oh, so there's this kind of monster mech rampaging throughout the city. Oh, this lady here reminds me of this. I believe she's Canadian. You can see the same Asian chick in like a lot of the ads out there. Because she's kind of like the stock girl, you know, the stock photo girl. I'm not sure. I forgot her name, but she's kind of the the unspoken model for pretty much every single brand out there. And she does have like a nice smile, so yeah. So this is the last piece we're going to review in his work. He does have a website. It's kind of like a blogspot website, but it's kind of set in a... I believe he has more work there, I'm not sure, but I will link all of his relevant links in the description below, so no worries. So yeah, again, this one's actually a bit more painterly. It does have a cinematic kind of frame. Not overly detailed, heavy on the painting, right? And I feel like this is the world we're heading to. If we don't, you know, have some gumption, speak out, I think everyone will be kind of in this guy's position essentially. So yeah, I'm feeling some very dystopian kind of vibes here. I think I'll end with that. It feels very depressing, but let's go back to his portfolio. Bam. His ArtStation, he does have like a lot of followers. So yeah, follow him on ArtStation. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. I think he does have an Instagram as well. And yeah, just study his work. If you're kind of interested in keyframes, storyboarding, storytelling, I think Alexander Mandradjiev is a nice guy to study. And if you're kind of sad with the fact that maybe you're not as good of a designer, or maybe it's not so much that you're not good, but maybe you're just not that kind of person, and I don't know, maybe try to explore keyframes, try to explore storyboarding or visual storytelling, right? And yeah, and don't be afraid to be different, because I think Alexander Mandradjiev is a nice example of that. Like, it does have a unique kind of style and approach, and that does set him apart. Because in concept art, you know, very heavy on the photorealism, and it's actually kind of starting to look boring, and we're kind of losing the art sense, the kind of individuality. Like, everyone is starting to become like part of like the Borg, like this kind of collective. And a bit of individuality, I think, does help in everything, right? Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Keep painting and stay free.